Gotcha. In terms of authorized, I noticed, I think just recently you brought some more officers on board. So how are you with respect to filling up the authorized number of officers in Walnut
Sure.
Creek?
Yeah, so right now we're down about 5 positions. We had authorization for 4 overhires. So yes, we're really trying to hire all of those. And now we have another 5 that council so graciously afforded us. So we're really looking to hire about a dozen police officers. We have a couple of pending retirements, but we have a few people that could retire anytime they want, which is a whole different conversation. Some people are very transparent with when they want to retire, and then sometimes people are just 2 bad days from retirement. If they're of retirement age and they have a couple of bad experiences out in the field and they say, you know what, I've done this job for 30 years, it's time to move on. Sometimes we can't anticipate that. But even if I had 3 vacancies, or 20, we're all competing. Every agency in the greater Bay Area, we're all competing for the same candidates. So, fortunately, our Police Officers Association just got a great contract. Thank you, City Council. When I walked into this position, not only was I told that, hey, the city just closed the books with a surplus of money, which is fantastic, but they also, the Police Officers Union just got a contract, a 4-year deal where they get really good raises each year. That's huge for me to walk into that. That way I knew that I'd have happy staff and a solid contract, and I wouldn't have to deal with the morale problems related to a contract, which oftentimes you have to contend with, especially being a new chief. If people are out of contract or the city has money problems and you can't be competitive in the labor market, it's really hard to grow a robust police force when you have those challenges.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. I think that's important for people to know about Walnut Creek, the attraction. What I'd like you to do is, I'm going to just jump in. There's so many things we want to talk about, but I'm going to jump in just briefly to what we call the Nordstrom event. And I think we've heard it so much. There was a special city council meeting on it. But what I'd like you to explain to our audience today is our sectors in Walnut Creek, how it works, and how, when an event like this happens, what are the resources available to come in? Because there's been an awful lot of discussion about that. And I will say there's a lot of media discussion about that event, perhaps, or others being on Snapchat or Twitter or something. And as part of this narrative, it's a big question, kind of talking about what the police department does with respect to that intelligence, trying to predict ahead of time what might happen.
Right. Yeah. So I'll back up. So when I was at San Leandro and, Walnut Creek experienced, the May 31st looting event of 2020, there was a few different incidents where we were able to intercept intelligence on various social media channels that sort of signaled that this was coming, because this is how a lot of these groups operate. You don't get 80 cars or 80 people and 20 to 30 cars in one area. And in San Leandro, we literally had hundreds of cars and at Bayfair Mall, at the Dodge dealership, and some of the other major retail establishments. You don't get that by a group text. You get it by using various social media channels and people following you. What we saw over the last probably year is these groups were getting a little smarter with how they were communicating, and they're using encrypted clandestine apps that we don't have access to. This is, sometimes we have undercover detectives that will infiltrate some of these groups, and sometimes we have confidential informants that will give us a tip. You never know who you can trust. If you're a criminal, you think, no one's going to snitch you out or rat on you, or whatever term you want to use. There's always one. So that's what we really rely on. So we have several different channels that we try to keep open to keep that information coming in, but it doesn't always work. And these groups are getting more, a lot of it's gang activities, so they're very selective on who they communicate with. And because they're using these encrypted apps, it makes discovering this intelligence almost impossible. That's a broader regional conversation that we're having right now with groups like NICRIC and some of our regional partners. Matter of fact, we had a phone meeting yesterday. And, you know, I really, when Nordstrom happened, we had no prior warning of it. I just happened to see something on social media about something that could have been happening, you know, a few cities away from us. And I started looking into it and talking to my captain, and literally 4 minutes later, Nordstrom got hit. But there was no prior warning that anything was going to happen in Walnut Creek. So part of it was there were things that were going on in the greater Bay Area, but our regional partners weren't really communicating this out. We're kind of hamstringed in that anytime we communicate intelligence information, we have to comply with the DOJ rules, and it's got to be encrypted, and we can't just start sending mugshots and pictures of cars with license plates, you know, via unencrypted channels. It just wouldn't be appropriate. So NICRIC is really trying to develop something that's a little bit more real time, where we can share that information very quickly. But even if we had, you know, 5 or 6 minutes notice on something, it's enough time for me to get police cars downtown to Nordstrom, or it's enough time for us to scramble other resources from our regional partners to get people to where they need to be. We're incredibly blessed to be where we're at because we have so many great police agencies around us that offer mutual aid, but we have to ask for it because we have to know what we're asking for. So without that intelligence, it's difficult. So on a given night, depending on the night, you know, we could have anywhere from a bare minimum of 4 cars and a supervisor on the street to upwards of maybe 10 cars and 1 or 2 supervisors on the street. You know, ideally, what we try to do is we staff during peak hours because that's when our services are needed the most. The issue with that is if there are peak call times, you might have a couple officers on the north end of town, another couple officers at a call on the east side of town, and then something happens downtown and you have a limited number of resources to draw from. So we try to staff in a way that we can try to anticipate where some of these problems are. Our downtown area on Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights, there is a lot of activity with the restaurants and the establishments that serve alcohol. So you always will see a greater presence downtown, and we also have our reserve officers that we utilize. But it's a tricky thing. I mean, in a perfect world, if we could have an unlimited budget and an unlimited supply of officers everywhere, that would be great. But that's just not the reality. So we have to be very calculating on how we deploy our staff. But we also rely on our supervisors to understand what regional resources they have available to them. So they could always call the county and ask for mutual aid. They could call Concord. They could call, you know, some of our sister cities in the area, CHP, and we're always very good about doing that. But sometimes, you know, in the case of Nordstrom, when you have 80 people converge on one retail establishment with no prior warning, it's a very difficult thing. The fact that we actually got 3 arrests and had, you know, pursuit of 3 other vehicles, which wasn't really broadly publicized, I mean, it's actually pretty good. I think we did a great job of responding. We had officers there within just a minute or 2, which is fantastic. If we had more resources, maybe we would have gotten more arrests, but we have a lot of evidence that we're still combing through, and we will be making more arrests in that case, and we will advertise it widely when we do.
Several people ask questions, and I know there many agencies have pursuit policies because people are saying, gosh, we had 25 or 30 cars in town. You
Yeah.
did have a couple of police officers on site, but what is the pursuit policy in Walnut Creek as it relates to, I would say, the danger of pursuing when there are lots of people around and lots of cars? And because people would ask, well, why didn't they just chase them down? How come the highway patrol didn't catch somebody? How come the sheriff's office didn't catch somebody?
Yeah, and this is a tricky subject too, and everybody has a different opinion on police pursuits. My perspective is, if you don't chase people, you're not going to catch them. And if you give up all the time, everyone's just going to run. That's what we're seeing in the greater Bay Area. especially a lot of the gang activity, the carjackings, they will not pull over. They know that if they drive the wrong way on the freeway, that we're not going to chase them because our policy, prohibits that, strongly suggests against it because it's just too dangerous. And that's what a lot of these criminals, they don't care. They will go onto the on-ramp in the opposite direction or off-ramp to get away from the police, or they'll drive the wrong way on a city street, or they'll do 90 miles an hour in downtown Walnut Creek. So we have a checklist of about 13 different items that the officer will kind of go through his or her mind very quickly and broadcast this information out very quickly. At the same time, the sergeant is evaluating what type of crime do we have? Can we possibly identify these suspects later on? If we were to disengage the pursuit, if we could, that's great. We'll catch them another day. How serious of a crime was committed? Did they just, severely assault someone? And is there a propensity of further violence if we didn't really catch them? How likely would it be that we would have, enough resources available? Do we have units with spike strips that can intercept the car at another location? So they try to evaluate all of those things very quickly, and they make a judgment call. So usually it's the officer that will make that first line of judgment on whether or not he or she felt it was worth pursuing that car. And then the sergeant may override. And we do have lieutenant watch commanders. The lieutenant watch commander is that third tier and may jump on the radio and say, you know what, this is too unsafe. Let's go ahead and discontinue. So it's a balancing act. We try to weigh the public safety with the need to really get this person or persons off the street very quickly and catch them. I think you're going to see more and more pursuits in the Bay Area as a result of this new culture among the criminal element to just get away at all costs, because what have they got to lose? They don't care if they hit somebody in a crosswalk and kill them. They just don't care. And, we've interviewed these people who are part of the criminal element and gang activity, and that's just part of their culture. They just do not care about human life.